Hey there folks, welcome to Spectrum Pulse. We talk about music, movies, art, and culture. And today we're going to be talking about the new solo record from Phonte called No News is Good News. So I've never really talked much about Phonte in any of my previous reviews, and unlike cases where I just haven't had the chance to delve into an MC's back catalog, this is more a case of my timing rather than my ignorance. The last full solo Phonte record dropped in 2011, before I even started writing these reviews on my blog. And while he did put out a collaborative record with Robertson in 2016, and he's always been involved with the foreign exchange, I honestly didn't hear much buzz about any of it, critical or otherwise. Never came up on my radar, and I just didn't really get any requests to cover it. Which is kind of a shame, really. Phonte's gotten flagged by a lot of critics for a while as a rapper's rapper, more known by MCs who can appreciate his hard-hitting wordplay, but not moving significant units outside of that. And this has a reputation that goes all the way back to his work with Little Brother in the mid-2000s on albums like The Minstrel Show. And yes, that record is critically acclaimed, and going back to it, deservedly so. It's a really great little album, but bad promotion by Atlantic at the time meant it didn't sell nearly as well as projected, so Phonte went back independent for his future projects. And yet, even with good promotion by Atlantic, I'm not sure it would have done well in the mainstream in the mid-2000s. And yet, if I'm being blatantly honest here, I'm not sure Phonte couldn't flourish in the mainstream given the right promotion. His bars are tight, sure, but he knew his way around great hooks and accessible production, and when you factor in how he's got a pretty damn solid singing voice to handle his own hooks, which he has proven time and time again with his R&B work in the foreign exchange, he really should have been bigger in the mid-2000s and now, especially considering the veterans he surrounded himself with on his last project like Elzai and Evidence and Pharaoh Monch, and even fellow artists who really should have crossed over to the mainstream but for label bullshit, Big Crit. And so when I heard he was dropping a new solo album this year at a lean 33 minutes, I made sure to muscle this up my schedule and prepare to dig in deep. So what do we get from Phonte's No News is Good News? Well, honestly, folks, I know I've said a number of times that some reviews just don't leave me a lot to say beyond, this is great, go listen to it, support the artist, you really want to get this a little bit more traction, and normally I still wind up putting together something that's longer than I anticipated. But with No News is Good News, I'm not sure there's much of a need for me to go much deeper, because when you break it down to brass tacks, this is a straightforward enough update to where Phonte has been between solo hip-hop albums that's a little bit more mature and measured, but no less smooth and effective. Maybe playing to a slightly older audience because of its production and some of its content, but still plenty accessible and living proof that Phonte doesn't need to chase trends to stay in the hip-hop conversation. Although he should really be in a lot more of that hip-hop conversation because this project is pretty damn great. And here's the thing. While the content could be deemed as playing to a slightly older demographic with a focus on more established relationships, reflecting on age and the loss of parents and his own personal health going forward, and ultimately taking a surprisingly optimistic eye for the future, it doesn't come across as old or preachy, and a huge part of that comes in his framing. Phonte might express some disdain for modern trends and the unspoken truth that so many people demanding bars in the mainstream really can't handle them, and so help me God, but it's more driven out of an acknowledgement of his own lane, his audience that will stick around for the wait, and confidence in what he can really deliver bar for bar, and that he can out-rap so many of those unskilled rappers in the mainstream in his sleep with references that never feel forced or lacking in cohesion. And as he sees himself and his parents get older or pass away, he's smart enough to acknowledge that with every coming generation, they ignore the lessons of their folks until they get old enough to deliver them to their kids, and he was one of those kids. And there's enough distance and honesty about his own mistakes and insecurities that doesn't care to pass down any sort of broader judgment. He's still focused on his own path. There's a sense of pragmatism and wry observation on songs like Such Is Life that, when coupled with ruthlessly well-structured internal rhymes and flows, that makes these songs go down incredibly easily. From the layered, braggadocious bars of So Help Me God, to so how he breaks down further into a deconstruction of his own creative process on Pastor Tigallo, before it gets even more intimate and personal on questions of aging, both his own on Expensive Jeans and his parents on Cry No More. Now granted, some of this is helped by the fact that he's unafraid to put more of the relationship-centric songs like Sweet You and Change of Mind on the back half of the album, or just step into the phenomenal groove-driven jams like Find the Love Again, which along with the closing song shows finding that internal peace and balance that can be the sort of honest personal renewal in his art that he needs. And even if he's not quite there yet, he's more confident that he's at least on the right path, and that gives him some peace of mind. And really, You know what, the more I worked to dig into Phonte's bars, the less that I found to outright complain about, and that's saying something. This is tightly written to a fault, and while there are moments like the extended shoutouts on Find the Love Again that feel a tad bit gratuitous, which is saying something on a record this short, there's very little to nitpick there. And when you go into the production, it's a lot of the same. Layered bars against synth tones imported from G-Funk, sultry hooks from both male and female singers, well-developed bass lines, and drum pickups that feel crisp while still maintaining real depth and control. In particular, I want to call out some of the piano lines that saturate songs in the melodies like So Help Me God and Change of Mind against the richer drum tones, or the gorgeous tinkling shimmer that you get on Cry No More and Such Is Life. Although, in the former case, some of the flat, buzzy synth lines do clash a little bit, and one of the few concessions to modernity on this album that doesn't quite complement the groove as well. And really, that's minor. But when you do compare them to the gleaming chimes and G-Funk of Find the Love Again, that sounds so lush and so poised, or the rattling, slightly more aggressive melody and cracking beat on Euphorium Back to the Light, there are a few points where the synths could afford to blend a little bit better, maybe a bit too futuristic for their own good. And on a similar note, while Freddie Gibbs' guest verse was welcome against Phonte's singing on Change of Mind, I've always really dug it when Freddie Gibbs writes about his relationship with such frank detail. It's a good lane for him. I do wish the song actually had a verse from Phonte himself, but really that highlights my biggest criticism overall on this album, that some songs could just use a little bit more meat or another verse to really drive them home for me. I get how the opener, To the Rescue, or the closer, Euphorium Back to the Light, they might not need any more bars, but considering how skilled of a storyteller Phonte is, and how lush his production can really feel, he probably could have gotten away with adding another verse to Expensive Jeans or Sweet You beyond just ad-libs in the case of that last song. But again, if I'm asking for an MC to add more content, you've got something really great here, and I really did like No News is Good News a lot. Phonte is proving with every single project that he's far from just being a rapper's rapper, he's just underrated as a whole. And No News is Good News is the latest and one of the most stark examples to date. This is getting critical acclaim and it deserves it. For me, easy 8 out of 10, and certainly I'm recommending it, especially if you're a fan of smooth and smart hip-hop with the poise and charisma to back it up, and that goes for all ages. And considering how tight and accessible this project feels, there's absolutely no excuse to not get on board. Definitely make the time, check this out. You won't regret it. So yeah, thanks a lot for watching. If you'd like to like and subscribe, I'd be more than grateful. I know my voice is a little bit hoarse right now. I'm currently getting through some congestion. Hey, it happens. You want to buy the record? Links in the description below. And I got the poll up there. I'm curious where more die-hard Phonte fanatics might fall on this. Just in terms of overall presentation, I actually think I might like it a little bit more than his last solo project. Just being honest there. If there's anything else I might be able to do to improve my presentation, I'm all ears. And if you guys want to support this channel or get involved in my scheduling process, link to my Patreon is right over there, where 3 times a week you guys get to vote on my schedule, and once a week for the higher tier contributors, you guys get to add albums, movies, or even a top 10 list to that schedule. If you want to see a schedule, post it on my Instagram. But till then, I'm Mark, you're watching Spectrum Pulse, and I'll see you next time.